rebels and troublemakers to stand out. Marginalized with voices making us so proud. For identity in the industry, we all shout. So many women empowered making their own.
Hello. This is a special episode of the all-new Women of Color Unite podcast, a podcast about navigating the entertainment industry as a woman of color. I'm Cheryl L. Bedford, founder of the nonprofit organization Women of Color Unite, creator of the JTC list, and co-founder of #StartWith8.
And I'm Manon de Reeper, vice president of Women of Color Unite and co-creator of #StartWith8.
But she got a theme song. What it takes to lead a real activist we lean on. Militant humility.
We want to be mindful of others when discussing our next topic. This episode contains discussion of sexual harassment and battery. For the past few months, Cheryl and the rest of the team of Women of Color Unite have been working together very closely with Roanna Renee, a young Black woman working in the entertainment industry as an actress.
We want to make sure that Roanna keeps full control of her own narrative and allow her to tell everyone her story of how she was inappropriately touched and sexually harassed by a studio DEI executive, and how she would not back down from this fight to make sure that this would not happen to another woman.
We're so pleased to introduce our guests for this podcast, women who have all been instrumental in this journey. First of all, the wonderful Roanna Renee.
Hello.
As well as Amy Malone, publicist and founder of Girl in Charge PR and board member of Women of Color Unite. And Tony Y. Long, founder of the Long Law Group and Women of Color Unite's attorney.
Hi, everybody.
Well, let's start with Roanna. Roanna, please go ahead and tell us your story in your words.
Well, I was invited to an art event called Art Melanated back in September of 2022. And I went there. And so as I found myself sitting outside, close to my friend as he was working in his workspace, I was approached by one of the artists who also curated the event. And she introduced me to an individual named Brett King. And she says, "Hey, Rana, I want you to meet my friend Brett. He's an executive at Sony." And I said, "Oh, hi." And so there was another lady that was sitting at the table with us. And so we began a three-way conversation about, shows and what to watch, because I mentioned to him that I had just had an audition with Sony 2 weeks prior to that day. And it was a coincidence. And he said to me, he was like, "Oh, okay, what show?" And I told him, and it was a soap opera. And, he was just like, "Oh, okay, cool." And, we continued the conversation, giving the girl information on what shows are good to watch, because she said she only read books. And, he offered to exchange information, and I gave him my phone number. He texted me, he sent me his socials, his social media handle. And so I said, "Okay, cool." And so he's like, "Well, you should come out with us later. We're going to go to dinner after this and blah, blah." And I was like, "Well, I had plans with my friend who was working the event." I said, "So let me check with them and see, what they want to do," because we had already made plans. I'm really hungry. I haven't eaten all day, I realized. And, we still have a few more hours before this is over. He goes, No, just come with us. Just come with us. And I was like, "Okay, as long as my friend can come, then I'll go." He's like, yeah, just your friend can come. It's fine. So I said, okay. So that was pretty much the end of the conversation. The night started to wind down, maybe within the hour or so. And when I say timeline of the hour, I mean also the timeline in which we had started the conversation and the initial introduction, all the way to, us preparing to leave and people kind of gathering, congregating to leave. And so I stepped outside of the patio area onto the sidewalk, and I was talking to a group of people. It was maybe like 5 or 6 of us standing in a group. And they were, passing a joint. I didn't partake. And there was a joke that happened right at the same moment that Brett approached me from the left side. And as he approached me from the left side, he took his right hand and rubbed my buttocks and moved it over to the right side of my thigh and began to caress my thigh. And I was so stunned, I didn't even, I couldn't believe what was happening. But in that moment, the joke was happening. And so I quickly moved to the other side of the circle. But there was a lot of laughter that was going on, although I was very, very uncomfortable. And I tried to just kind of not draw a lot of attention to it. One, because I was just really shocked. I didn't even understand what happened because there was nothing in a conversation that we had that alluded to him even thinking that that behavior was invited. And so in my mind, I'm like, okay, well, that should be an indication like this needs to stop. There shouldn't be anything else that happens from here. And if I'm being quite frank, normally in those situations, I can get really indignant because it happens to me in other social settings, or it has happened to me before in other social settings where I'm touched inappropriately or not wanting to be touched at all. And, you know, men just always have this way of like touching your back or touching your waist. And, you know, but this was a little bit more because the outfit that I was wearing was very, very thin in fabric. And so it felt very, very, very sexual because I could feel every fiber of him touching me. On top of this is a complete stranger. This man is old enough to be my father, if not older. And there was nothing that led to this. And so I was really confused on what made him think that that was okay for him to even do. And so with that, I said, okay, let me not, you know, cause a scene. I don't want to be disruptive. This is not the time or the place. You know, I don't know what kind of executive this man is. You know, I'm an actress in this industry breaking into television and film. And I do not want to handle this in a way that is inappropriate for what is it that just happened. Although what happened just was very, very inappropriate. And so I was, to be honest, very scared and nervous because I did not want to cause harm to myself or my career before it even got started in that sector of the industry. And so I didn't say anything to anybody. I didn't even mention it to my friend because he was still working. And, you know, we kind of came to the consensus like, oh, okay, so now we're going to go. And I had said something earlier in the night of where like I had parked my car right in front and, you know, we would drive to the next, you know, art gallery around the corner. And before we went to dinner, it was like a quick stop over there. And then we were going to go around the corner. So both of these venues were within 3 minutes of where we were at the current time. And so I go to get in my car to travel with by myself, but there's like a group of like 6 of us that are moving. Right. And, as I go to get in my car, Brett says to me, oh, I'm just going to ride with Roanna. And he just opens up the car door. It just gets in my my passenger seat. And so in my mind, I'm like, shit, you know, I'm like, I don't know how this is going to go. So before I even got in my car, I signaled to my friend that was working the event. And I said, hey, and I had texted him at the same time. I said, I need you to hurry up. Like, I need you to close down what you're doing. And I need you to come and like meet me here. And I sent him the information and he was like, okay, I'm coming. I'm like, no, I need you to come now. And so I got in the car, we drove 2 minutes around the corner. You know, I kind of kept it very like, hey, like, you know, so where's this place? And he said, it's just right here. Oh, let's try to find a parking spot and just kind of keep it very, very just like, you know, bare minimum conversation, but not be awkward because I'm really scared in this moment because I'm like, I don't know how this is going to escalate. And I'm not really too sure what to do other than like, this is crazy. Like, I have no idea what to really do from here, but let me just kind of like figure it out as I go along. So we get to the next stop. We spend maybe 30 minutes there. Maybe after 15 minutes, my friend finally shows up and I'm like, oh my God, thank you. And I still hadn't said anything to him because I was still processing and I just like didn't understand what was happening. So, you know, I stood outside for the most part. And so when we decided we were moving in a group, you know, Brett asked for everybody to send him their email address or their phone numbers and stuff so that he can put them on the list for Soho House. So I had already sent him earlier my friend's information. I said, please make sure you add him to the list. And so everybody kind of congregated around him outside on the sidewalk at the second event and gave them his information. And then we all got our invitations to go to Soho House. And we were going to Holloway House around the corner. So I told my friend, I'm like, I'm so happy you came because like, I'm really ready to eat. But I'm like, you know, didn't really allude to what was going on or what had happened already. So I go back to my car. Brett, of course, gets back in the car with me because he rode with me. But my friend was following behind us in his car. So we drive to Holloway House, we get out. Everybody checks in at the desk, and then in comes, the individuals who curated Art Melanated. And they were already sitting at the table once we got seated. So I was confused on how they even beat us there, because it was the last day of the art installation. And so in my mind, I didn't expect them to come, because I thought that they would still be like, wrapping up, whatever. We get over to the table, and there's like 8 of us. There's 3 women, including myself. And there's 5 gentlemen. Brett sat across the table from me. We didn't say 2 words to each other. I didn't allude to anything being weird or awkward. I just kept my conversation between the 2 ladies that were sitting to the right of me, to the point where I kind of almost ignored my friend who was to the left of me, engaging in conversation with him and another individual that was part of the Art Melanated event. And he was trying to make some connections and things like that. And so I knew that I was on a budget. So I ordered just $20 worth of food. I didn't order a drink. I had water. My friend and I split some fries, but, I knew he was going to eat most of them. And so when the bill came, everybody's kind of like standing up. And so, Brett and Saul decided, who is a friend of Brett's, decided that they were going to split the check. The check was about less than $400 for 8 people to eat. And they were like, oh, it's not that bad. And I heard one of them say, well, I'll pay half. And then Brett was like, okay, cool, I'll pay the other half. And so then, because I had Brett's information already, I said, hey, Brett, how do I pay you? Is it Venmo? Is it Apple Pay? What? And he was just like, oh, don't worry about it. It's not that bad. He's just like, I'll just contact you later and demand that you pay me for your food. Ha ha. And then he was just like, or I'll demand that you have sex with me to pay for your food. And I just was kind of like, okay. I kind of like took a beat. And I looked at my friend. And I looked back at Brett. There was like this laughter that erupted, but it was kind of like, are you serious? Did you just say that to me? And you said it out loud, and you said it in front of other people. And I don't know who else may have heard it, but I just was so embarrassed and felt violated. I just was like, the audacity. And in that moment, I think my expression and my reaction to him let him know, quite frankly, that he had fucked up. Because he then sat next to me. He was standing over me when he said it. And he sat next to me. He got real close and looked me straight in my eye. And he said, please do not sue me for sexual harassment. And I just looked at him, and I looked at my friend. I said, I need to go. Can you move out of the booth? And I moved past him. I didn't want to leave in a hurry so that there would be anything weird from the perception of everybody else. So I went and I said bye to everybody. And I left. I go outside, get my car from valet. And once I get in the car, I call my friend and I'm like, can you believe that? And he goes, oh, he was drunk. I said, no. You don't even understand. I said, so I explained to him what happened earlier in the night. And he just was like, what? And I'm like, yes. He was just like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Had I known that, he was like, I just really didn't understand what was happening because, he was tired. He had been working a lot. And so he just didn't understand. And, I was I was pissed initially because I felt so disrespected and I felt harassed and I felt violated. It was all of these things. And I'm like, in my mind, I'm thinking like, who has the audacity to approach somebody, one, touching them first, and then secondly, saying something, in my opinion, that's verbal rape, in my opinion, like, you gonna demand that I have sex with you over $20 of food? You have got to be joking. My food costs $20. So what I found out later was that my friend had sent Brett enough money for the both of us. So he spent them $44 or something for our food through Apple Pay. So the next day I wake up and I had texted one of the women Jania, who curates Art Melanated. And, she sent me some butterflies. She was like, you're such a vibe, so nice meeting you, exchange some words. And, I did my normal routine. Like, I get up on Sundays, I listen to the sermon online, and, I kind of go about my day. And I had decided, I had booked a client that I was going to go see, who happens to be a friend of mine that day. And so I get there and I go to like just tell her what happens to me. And it's like this rush came over me of like what really happened. And I was hysterical. Like, I was shaking. My anxiety was through the roof. Like, I couldn't even finish her lashes. Like, my hands were shaking. I couldn't hold the tweezers. And I told her, I said, sis, I can't even do this. And she's like, it's okay. And then, I go into this spin of like, I wasn't wearing anything super revealing and I didn't say anything. I didn't do it. She was just like, it's not your fault. He's a predator. There was nothing else that you could have done that still would have warranted him touching you in any way at all. And so, I finally go to, I'm like, okay, I need to talk to somebody. But again, I don't know anything about this man other than the fact that he was introduced to me as an executive at Sony. And I'm like, this is huge. And it's like, I'm scared for my career, but I'm also feeling so conflicted because I'm like, I have been violated and I cannot stress enough how frustrated I've become being in this industry and walking into spaces that I'm more than qualified to be in because of my training and because of my desire to be here and all the work that I've done, and be sexually harassed by anybody or men that are in power that feel like it's okay to do so, or let me just test the waters. And if I'm being quite frank, I think that once he knew that my audition was for a soap opera, he was like, oh, okay, I get it. She's green, because soap operas are low-hanging fruit for actors and actresses breaking into television and film. And so I think in his mind, I was an easy mark because I could not rationalize how did he even get to a decision where he was going to touch me in that kind of way? Like, touching someone's behind in their thigh is very intimate. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, I don't like to be touched anyway, unless I'm in that space with you. So to do that in a professional setting, although he was not there, he was there on his own accord. It was like, that still was just unwarranted and was just inappropriate, to say the least. So, I talked to my mom, but before that I had called Jania, or I texted and I said, hey, something happened last night. Something inappropriate was said to me at the close of dinner. And I kind of just want to discuss it with you. Give me a call when you get a chance. So she finally calls me and I said, hey, it was said to me at the end of dinner that, oh, don't worry, I'll just demand that you have sex with me to pay for your food. And her exact response was, who said that, Brett? Now, mind you, her husband was there, and there were 4 other gentlemen outside of her husband and Brett that were present. And for her to automatically say that, let me know that she knew something. And that this is his behavior, this is a reputation, this isn't something that's out of his wheelhouse or his tendencies to do. And so then I said, okay. I said, she goes, wow, I don't really know what to say. She was like, I've been friends with Brett for 15 years and he's been around my other friends and they're cute and they've never had any, problems or anything like that. And I said, listen, I'm not calling you to, basically put you in the middle of this because I know that that's your friend, but I'm calling you to ask you for advice as a woman in this industry when I'm sure this has happened to you. How do you handle the situation? And she said, well, I usually just let the person know, like, it's not okay, or maybe you should send him a message or maybe call him. And I said, okay. I said, please don't mention this to him because I'm still processing. I'm not too sure like what it is that I want to do, but, I'm just really lost right now. Like, I just don't know. And so she says, okay. And, we end the call. And so my friend who was with me at who was working the art event, he invited me to Cheryl's birthday party. He says, hey, Cheryl's having her birthday party tomorrow. Like, it's going to be, at someone's house and they have a pool, bring your bathing suit, just come and like, just kind of relax and kind of just like, chill for the day. And I said, okay. And in my mind, I'm just going to go and kind of just take like a respite because I'm like, for the last 2 days, I'm just up in a tizzy. Like, I don't even know what to do. I'm uncomfortable. My anxiety is really, really high and I really just can't function. And so I'm like, okay, I'll go. And so we get there and, I had met Cheryl on Clubhouse prior to this. And, so we had known of each other because Gil talks about each of us to each other quite often. And, but I had never met her. So I approached her and I said, hey, Cheryl, I was just like, I'm Gil's friend, Ron. And she lit up and she's like, oh my God. And so we embraced, we had this hug and it was great. And later on in the day, my friend says, did you tell Cheryl what happened? I'm looking at him like, no, I didn't tell Cheryl what happened. Like, I'm still trying to process what happened. Like, what are you saying right now? And like, and in my mind, I'm like, I don't really know who these other people are. And I'm not sure that this is a place for me to have this kind of conversation. But I was really thrown off. But that just goes to show you like where my mind was. I knew Cheryl was the president and founder of WOCU, of Women of Color Unite. Like, I knew that. I had been a member for the last probably almost 2 years. And it just didn't even dawn on me because my mind just couldn't even conceptualize what was going on in that moment or what I had just went through, because I was still just feeling very vulnerable, very powerless, and all of these things. And so I began to tell her what happened. I didn't mention names at first. And then eventually I showed a picture on his social media, and she was floored. She was floored. She was outraged. She was like, I cannot believe this. I have sat on panels with this man about diversity, equity, inclusion. He's VP of diversity, equity, inclusion at Sony. And I said, are you serious? Because in my mind, it was like, there's no way you are in an executive position as vice president at a major studio of diversity, equity, inclusion, and you are perpetuating the very thing that you are supposed to be protecting people from, which is harassment, discrimination, racism, all of these things. And it was just like a whole load was like weighted on me even more, because I'm like, I don't even know what my life is right now. Like, what is happening? This is a bigger problem than I even knew in the wake of Me Too and all of these things. And it was just a lot to process. And she said to me, she says, well, I will help you if you want me to. She was like, me and the team, we will, help you through this. We'll be there. We'll support you and all of these things. And I said, okay. And there was a woman there who's a part of the inclusion rider by the name of Fanchon Cox, who offered her support. And she was like, yeah, she was like, I know him too. And yes. And I knew he was this and that and blah, 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 blah. And, she was just like, I'm going to be there for you and I'm going to support you. And, I just was like, okay, thank you. But I really was more comfortable and had some type of relationship rapport with Cheryl. And a lot of it had to do with my friend Gil, who introduced me to her years ago. So this is after that, Cheryl completely took the lead on everything, obviously under, my advisement, but she has been nothing but wonderful. So I'll let her continue on her involvement with this.
Wow. First of all, thank you, Roanna. Every time I hear your story, it breaks my heart. I have heard this story multiple times, and I'll get into all the work, all the hoops that we have to jump through. But it does. It breaks my heart every time. So yeah. But I think one of the things you forgot to tell is when you showed us his picture, you have the text messages.
Yes.
I want you to actually find those text messages and then read them, because when I read this, everybody will understand my reaction.
Okay. So let me go back to the original text from him. This is Brett King, his socials. I said, got you. Please add my friend and his phone number to the list. He sends the link for Holloway House. So Sunday, this all happened on Saturday. So Sunday, I texted him in the afternoon and I said, Brett, I want to be clear that last night your comment to me about you contacting me and demanding me to have sex with you after I asked how to pay for dinner and you touching my thigh earlier in the night was not welcomed and inappropriate. I absolutely felt sexually harassed, uncomfortable, and violated. Please know that if any time we are again in the same space, that behavior will not be tolerated and is to never happen again. Please let me know where I can send you money for my portion for dinner. He responds and says, so sorry that what was intended as a joke was offensive, not my intent. Enjoyed meeting you and hope you had a good time other than the above. Don't worry about the money. Perhaps it can serve as an apology. Be well. Now, when I got it, I did not feel it was sincere. I felt it was a girl, get over it. It's not that big of a deal. Like, whatever. And tried to manipulate me into thinking like, oh, just keep the money. We're talking about $20 here, guys. First of all, okay? That's an apology for you sexually assaulting me and for you sexually harassing me and knowing that you did it because you asked me not to sue you for sexual harassment. So my response to him was, thank you for that. Thank you for admitting that you did what you did, but also admitting that you don't really have, and you don't even feel any kind of remorse or accountability for this. Because that is, as a VP of DEI at Sony, you do not respond to somebody telling you that they feel absolutely violated and sexually harassed and what you did was inappropriate, as you just brush it off like it was nothing. It wasn't even, I am so sorry. It was just so sorry that was intended as a joke, was offensive. Like, you can't take this lightly. How are you in this kind of position and you are perpetuating this behavior? But if somebody tells you that this is how they feel about it, you are just acting like it's not a big deal. So if somebody else in Sony was to come to you with this same situation, how would you have handled it? Because if you handled it like this, you don't need to be at your post as vice president of DEI. Go ahead, Cheryl.
That was my reaction, right? That was my reaction. She showed me his picture. She showed me the text, and I'm like, this can't stand. Like, after me, hashtag me too. Like, what are we doing here, right? So let's be very, very clear. This was my birthday. So we're talking about September 26, 2022. I actually know Brett's boss better, Paul Martin, Chief Diversity Officer. And I sent it to their chief people's head of HR, Stacey Green. So we sent an email and we asked for a few things. One, and let me be very, very clear. We asked for Brett to be released from his post. We did not say to fire the man. We said he should not be VP of DEI at Sony. Then we said, you all need some diversity training. Because how the hell did this shit happen? Right? Like, how the hell did this shit happen? So we sent over a few demands. Let me be very clear. None of them were money. This has never, ever, ever been about money because we want to change, right? Like, this industry needs a change. I do understand why people sue for money because seems to be the only thing people actually understand. People don't take it seriously. Hitting their pocketbook is one of the places to get them to take it seriously. For this man to say, so sorry, let dinner suffice at $20? So you're telling this young Black woman, and let us be very, very clear, this young Black woman, when you were old enough to be her father, you are a Black man as well. And you are saying that everything you did was worth $20. Okay, make it make sense. So one of the very first things that we did was we got together a board of directors meeting because we're about to take on Sony. And so our staff and our board met. They met with Roanna. They met with her friend who was there, who's Gil Jackson, who is actually now one of the founding members also of Men of Color Unite, our brother organization. And our board decided to go with this, right? So we had this letter that Roanna had approved. The Tony's like, it's good. Nobody is overstepping. Everything that we're asking for is good. Amy Malone, our publicist, who is also the board member of Women of Color Unite, she looked it over. We were all set to go. It was really important that we keep everything quiet, right? That we had a plan. We were going to release it on a Friday. We like doing that just because it gives people the weekend. People don't tend to hurry up and react. So it gives them time to actually process it before they hit us back. Because, and everybody who knows what we do over at Women of Color Unite, everything is based on statistical analysis. Everything is based on studies from the National Institute of Health. I also will say that we had Dr. Akosua Lasane, our head of education and head of DEIAB at Women of Color Unite. I always say this, like, I was raised by an activist, but my degrees are in filmmaking. So I have people around me who know more. So Akosua knew about it. Like everybody who needed to know within our organization, who we had to get input from to make sure that we were asking for everything that we should regarding DEIAB training. Yeah, and we felt really, really good about that letter. And then came the Thursday night before the letter goes out. And I am with our Native American and Indigenous advocates, Carissa Valencia and Dr. Jolie Proudfit. Carissa Valencia's Spirit Rangers was premiering. So I was at on Netflix. So I was actually at that event when my phone starts blowing up. And I start getting calls from Gil and Roanna. And Gil is being texted. And Brett is calling him. Brett's friend Saul is texting him. And we're like, what is going on? So I call Roanna and I call Gil. And it is obvious that somebody has told them. I'm going to give props to Gil because he took a lot of harassment. The next morning, I get a phone call from Fange Cox. And she says she told him. I am not going to go into details. Let me just say that conversation did not go well. She is somebody I used to know. She then sends an email to Roanna. And let me just say, as a Gen Xer, I love you millennials because Roanna, you read her for filth. I then called up Tony. I'm not going to say this shit didn't hurt because I was crying. I was so upset. And Tony, you were great. Thank you. I called up Amy. I called up I was just beside myself. Part of the reason is because we as an advocacy group, we don't have that Time's Up money. So Tony and Amy and everybody is working for free. Surprise. I wanted it to go, we had a plan that was approved by our staff, a plan that was approved by the board, a plan that was approved by Amy, who was our publicist at the time, also a board member, a plan that was approved by our attorney. All of this took a lot of hard work, dedication, and a lot of hours. So we just said, we're just going to go ahead with the plan. We're just going to go ahead with the plan. And so we sent it out. That went out on a Friday. The next week, we heard from Sony. I believe it was Paul Martin sent me an email. They started an internal investigation. We met with Dave Patel from Sony. He's in the UK. He hadn't been working there long. So I do appreciate the fact that they actually got someone who had no ties, right? But this is what I'm talking about. So Roanna tells her story, right? And she had to keep telling her story over and over and over again. I think Roanna is one of the bravest people I've ever met because she did keep telling it over and over and over again. Gil told his story as the witness, as the person who now people are texting and calling, right? He's sending the text to Tony. So now, as an advocacy group, we are now not only covering Roanna, now we are also covering Gil. It was a lot. It was a lot. I'm just saying. So they send the report back to Stacy and to Paul. And then my team meets with Stacy and Paul. So it's me, Manon de Reeper, our VP, Gregory, who is also a board member, treasurer and director of operations, and Dr. Akosua-Lasane. So I had Akosua on there for a very specific reason, and here's why. Most DEI people come out of HR. DEI should be people who are in education, should be people who study it, should be people who understand things like anti-Blackness and colorism and ableism and the intersectionalities. People who have PhDs in this, not people in HR who think they know a little something, something. And I had Dr. Akosua-Lasane actually write a report after that call. And even in the middle of that call, Akosua said, I need to take a break to remind somebody because to discuss the book, All the Women Are White, All the Men Are Blacks. And I believe the rest of the title is But Some of Us Are Brave. Because all of DEIAB is based on works from Black women. All of it. So Acosta writes a report. Within the call, Manon took notes. Because I'm a Black woman. If I'm going to take on, if not just me, our organization, if we're going to take on Sony, but let us not forget it is founded and run by a Black woman, I'ma have receipts. So we documented everything, all the texts that Roanna had, the calls, the texts harassing Gil, the letter, right? Where Fanchon explains why she did it, which there is no fucking excuse. Rowanna's response as the victim. And then everything when we met with Dave, like I said, Manon has all of the notes from when we met with Stacy and Paul. And then Acosta's report. We were supposed to meet with Sony. They ended up canceling the meeting. I think the reason that they canceled the meeting was because, so Roanna, you forgot one thing. The day after my birthday, you went to the police station to file a report. And they said that they could not keep her information secret. And she called me. And I said, I will support anything you decide to do. And she's like, I don't want my information out there. After the meetings and the sort of slow rolling of all of this, let's say, right? Because I will say within that conversation, they're like, we can't tell you what disciplinary action we're taking with Brett. And it wasn't at a Sony function. Okay, let's be very clear. This is Hollywood. Everybody leads with their title. Point blank, period. He was introduced with his title. We all lead with our titles. I mean, this is the way this industry works, right? It's based on relationships. You can't have your cake and eat it too. So they tell us that they can't tell us what disciplinary action they are going to take, which I understand as far as privacy with employees, but after making this woman tell her story over and over and over again, make that shit make sense. So Roanna is just we have the notes. We're sending her the notes. We're letting her know because let me be perfectly clear and restate this. This was about her at every step. So we send it to her. Roanna says, fuck it. If they release my information at the police station, they release it. And so she filed a police report. And as it turns out, whoever she had talked to was wrong because they could hide her information. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, the meeting that we had at Sony got canceled. And they have never rescheduled. Ever. So cut to, I'm on the elliptical working out. And another friend who's a publicist texts me and says, well done. I'm like, say what? This was February. End of January, beginning of February. And she says, well done. And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. And she says, check out Brett King's LinkedIn. And it no longer said that he was working at Sony. And I thought to myself, well done, WOCU. And so let me just thank my entire team, my board of directors. I will say my auntie sit on the board of directors. And of course they were like, we're going to protect this young Black woman. I'm just saying, there's nothing like Black aunties. There's nothing like Black aunties. So I want to thank my entire board of directors. I want to thank our staff. I want to thank everyone.
And I want to thank everyone too. And you as well, Cheryl.
Oh, thank you, baby girl. The fact that WOCU was able to do this in 3 months, that letter went out in October. 3 months on no money and just the sweat equity of our entire team. So I I'm going to leave it at that and let the things work out the way that things need to work out. Yes. So that leads me into Tony. Hey, Tony.
Yes, Roanna, I've heard the story so many times. You told it to me personally. And I really hate that as an attorney when someone comes to me, because you're not the first, and unfortunately, I know you will not be the last in this industry. And in order for anyone to believe you, you've got to go through all the details and relive that. And for anyone listening who thinks, oh, he just touched her buttocks and her thigh, that's no big deal. Like, oh, no, there's something called body autonomy. And it is absolutely a big deal that this happened. Roanna is extremely brave. She's extremely resilient. Whether or not this career works out for you as an actress, you're fantastic. And I know that you can do whatever you put your mind to, because you brought your strength and your perseverance to this. And yes, has never been about money. It has been about just wanting someone to be held accountable for their actions. But what I wanted to do was to hear from her what she needed and what she wanted to do. And then also hit her with some real world facts. I mean, there's a reason sexual assaults are so underreported. The fact that someone at the police station told you they couldn't keep it a secret, to me, is a deliberate attempt to get you to not report that. Because that's basic. They should have known that you protect the identity of victims of sexual assault. And I just because I wanted to make sure I was aware. So this is technically sexual battery. Those of us in law, there's a difference between assault and battery. We're so accustomed to saying assault. But this is defined by California Penal Code Section 243.4 PC as the act of touching another person's intimate parts without their consent. That's important. For the purpose of sexual gratification, arousal, or abuse. And it's a misdemeanor generally, but it can be elevated to a felony depending on how egregious the conduct is. And I just wanted to shed light when Roanna talked to me what she was going to be facing if she wanted to move down the road in a legal capacity. It's not easy. The law doesn't make it easy because the laws are written by men who are the primary transgressors in this area. We're seeing it right now in the case with Trump and E. Jean Carroll. So in the face of all of that, being told, okay, I know this happened to you, it's horrible, but here's a roadblock, here's going to be another roadblock, and here's some more roadblocks. Roanna said, F all that, I'm moving forward. And she did. And the only part of the story that I will add, Hollywood has a problem, and it's not just Hollywood. I mean, this is the industry we're in. It's pervasive throughout all of these industries with men who are abusive. And it's amazing to me. And I actually sat and thought about it for a second. Like, you actually think you have a right to have access to a woman's body, because the idea that you wear something, you were questioning what you wore. I wasn't trying to be provocative. And so we have a real problem. That's part of that rape culture that people talk about. It's one of those, a small part of it, but it really is the crux of it. And so when I told a friend about what happened to Roanna, I didn't use any names. I just said it was an executive at Sony. And this friend said, oh, is it Brett King? So while this did not happen at a Sony event, as Cheryl said, he led with his title, and he's representing the company everywhere he goes. And he's a high-profile executive in a very, very important space where that kind of behavior, like, you need to be above reproach. My goal in stepping into this was to help Roanna in whatever way I could in terms of helping her navigate what she needed to navigate. As a Black woman, I know how this issue disproportionately impacts us. This is an issue and we've got to address it and we've got to be proactive. And even though Brett is no longer with Sony, that only begins to heal kind of the harm. No matter what happens from a legal perspective, this is something you're going to carry with you. And so you're going to have to do the work to kind of unburden yourself from this horrible thing.
No. And it's been a process, it hasn't even been a year. It's gotten a little easier because my focus hasn't been there. I've been able to focus on other, good things that have been a part of my life. But I am more than grateful that Cheryl, you, Amy, Manon, and everybody else that's a part of WOCU that have been 10 toes down for me in this fight, because it has not been easy. I've been in therapy for it, because it's just one of those things where it's like, there's so many things that are riding on this, but I'm a strong and firm believer in, I have to protect myself. If I don't, nobody else is going to. And this is the message that I want to send to all the listeners and anybody who's listening. Like, you have to do what you have to do for you, and not be and be unapologetic for protecting yourself, because there's so much strength in that. And, I appreciate everybody telling me, the strength that I've exuded, but it's been a journey, and a lot of my strength has come from you guys allowing me to stand on your shoulders in support of me through this. And I don't take it lightly, and I'm very, very grateful for it. So thank you so much, Tony, for everything.
And Tony, can you tell us a little bit more about what women who may be in like a similar situation, what they can do when it comes to the law specifically?
Well, I think the first thing that any woman who finds herself in this situation should do is make sure she's okay, is to make sure she feels safe and supported, because it's not an easy process. It's hard. It's a hard process. So definitely, if you can, speak to an attorney who practices in this area, who maybe does criminal defense and who does personal injury, who can advise you on the steps to take. I knew first and foremost that what she should do is file a police report. Having that official report of the assault is very important, and just be truthful. I mean, that really is the best advice that I can give you. And until someone is convicted of something, we have generally say as attorneys it's alleged. But you're the person this happened to. So for you, this isn't an allegation. This is the reality of the situation. It's not even so much from a legal standpoint. I really just want anyone who's a victim of any kind of sexual assault or sexual battery to just take care of herself or himself first. Make sure you have a therapist. If you can find one who can support you through this process, because it is so hard. It's hard to hear the story. I cannot imagine what it feels like to tell it over and over and over again. And that's one of the things that we almost insist that victims do, is to, and you relive it with each telling. And it takes a psychological, emotional, and a mental toll on you. So having support is far more important than whatever your legal response to it is going to be. And decide what it is that you want. It's okay if you don't want to sue this person and get a monetary award or something like that. It's okay if you ultimately decide that you don't want to go to the police and get the state involved in the incident. It's whatever you feel that you have to do for yourself. And the most important thing that I'll tell any victim is there is absolutely nothing that you did that warranted that behavior.
And when someone is receiving those types of messages, what will you suggest people do with those?
Keep them. I've had people who are like, I couldn't deal, I deleted all my texts. Like, no, No. If you're inclined, like, I can't deal, I don't want to see these, forward them to a friend. Download them so that they are preserved if you feel the need to get them off your phone. But it's very important to keep that kind of evidence. That is evidence.
Hey, Amy Malone. Yeah, I'd love your perspective as a publicist, maybe even as a board member. And then the same question that Manon asked Tony, which is like, what should women do when they find themselves in this situation from a publicity standpoint, right? Because people like to demonize the victims. They want to make them jump through hoops. So I'd love to just get your perspective as a publicist.
As a publicist, sometimes I have to step away from what we do as publicists because it's our job to clean up messes. It's our job to make sure that we spin a scenario, spin things, turn things around. However, as a Black woman, I see a Black woman that has been hurt, that has been victimized, and has been devalued by a man who was in a position to protect her. And it's not only his job at Sony, it is his job. And he didn't do that. He utilized his power and something that he's used to doing as a way of devaluing you and making you feel, and let me say this, wanting you to feel, because he didn't make you feel anyway, wanting you to feel that you owed him something. And so, for Cheryl is that's my rebel. So as a publicist, that's my rebel. Cheryl raises that consciousness in me constantly and makes me step up. Even when I sometimes can get complacent with things, I have to realize that this is not okay. And what has happened to you wasn't okay. So I wanted to make sure that when you were going into interviews, when you were talking about this horrible thing that happened to you, that you were comfortable, that you knew, hey, I have someone here that is protecting me. As a publicist, I represent artists, I represent talent, I represent organizations. It is important to me to make sure that people who are victimized, people are not afraid to say, hey, this happened to me, Amy, what do I do? And me not say, well, this could hurt your career later, so maybe you shouldn't talk about it. There's a lot of industry people out there that will do that. I'm glad that you did meet Cheryl. I'm glad that Gil was strong enough to talk about it as well, because sometimes we don't hear men stepping up and we don't look at them as victims sometimes. But he was bullied. He was harassed. So then he became a victim as well. So, I just wanted to be that person that you could run things by. So, again, it was just important for me to make sure that you had the best representation, that you were consulted about this, what might happen in the interview, so that you were prepared. You were prepared to tell your story, and you were prepared to do it in a way that showed your dignity, your character, and your strength. And you did just that. And so I'm very, very proud of you. And I say this to anyone else, if they come up against that, it's easy to say, tell somebody, go up against them, tell the authorities, that's an easy thing to say. It's a very difficult thing to do. So I suggest to anybody, find a friend, a real friend, and talk to them about it. Take your moment to really let it sink in, because it's an emotional thing. And we need that emotion, but we also need that strength. And we need you to be able to tell your truth very clearly and concisely. So find a friend, talk to them, and then find a tribe. Because you need a tribe when you're going to go up against a giant. You need, and WOCU is a heck of a tribe. And then having a publicist is a great thing when you can have someone to help you create the narrative, the message. Look, this is what happened. Stay on this message. Stay on this. Tell this. Hammer this in. He was wrong. He was a predator. This is what he did. And I'm not going to back away from what he did. And anybody who sympathized with it, because anybody who did not take action and did not reach out to you sympathized with it. Now, they may have cut him off, and I can say this, Sony may have fired him. However, not taking a meeting with you, not moving forward and not saying they have to admit guilt, but acknowledging something happened to you and acknowledging that it is not acceptable and it is not a part of the culture that they are supporting, to me speaks volumes. So I suggest to anybody, especially a woman of color, have Black representation. And Black representation that is not scared. Black representation that will stand up for you, stand with you, and make sure that you are represented and seen in the best light possible. Not someone who's going to cower away, but someone who is going to protect you and watch out for you and bring you into a fold of other people that will support you. So that to me is very important. We do see people here. We hear people talking about it. Even some of our top talent, top actresses talk about what happened to them in their past. And if you look at their representation, they still do not have representation that looks like me or you. And that's a problem. That's a problem. So that's me on my soapbox. I had to say it. Black representation is important.
So just to kind of move on from that, I wanted to ask kind of where are we at now with this story specifically and what's going to happen next?
I think it's time for Roanna to get out there and to talk about it. It is time for women to start speaking up over and over and over again. And Roanna, what is it that you want?
I want women to go from being or feeling powerless to powerful. I want them to feel impactful in a way that is self-serving as it is serving others. As Amy mentioned and Tony mentioned, this happens all the time. And years ago, this was swept under the rug and it was taboo to talk about these kind of things, and you just dealt with it. We're in a new time and we're in a new day. And again, it goes back to my original position of you have to protect yourself. Nobody else is going to do it more than you. And if you can rally, like Amy said, a tribe, a sisterhood, some kind of support behind you, lean into that. Because again, this is not an isolated incident. This is probably happening right now as we're having this conversation. Somewhere on some set, at some studio, in some office, somewhere. This is happening to somebody. This is happening to another woman. This is happening to men because this happens to men too. And so you have to share your story so that we can come together as a collective and stand more powerful in protecting yourselves. There's so much power in that when there's a collective effort. But when people feel isolated or people feel like they're the only one, it's not healing what it is that we need in this world, which is really just people just to feel loved, to feel protected, and not feel ashamed or, attacked in some kind of way. So I think we need to move from being or feeling powerless to powerful.
Thank you so much, Roanna. And before we wrap up, I also wanted to ask you, how can people support you? Where can they find your work? What are you working on? Just so that people can connect with you, if that is something that you want.
Thank you for that, Myrna. I have a podcast and it's called the Shero Game Podcast. It's on all platforms. That's SHE capital RO Game. And it's curated and made for Black women and the things that we go through, relationships, life. And, we just my best friend and I give our perspectives and our experiences, and it has helped a lot of people stay empowered and be knowledgeable in how to navigate life in a healthy way, mentally healthy, spiritually healthy, and emotionally healthy. And so that's at the Shero Game Podcast on Instagram. We have a YouTube channel as well. Season 2, we have season 1 and season 2 out. So I just encourage anybody who needs to have some, pick me up on the journey of healing and friendship breakups and being a Black woman in corporate America, navigating, serving and loving your partner through adversity. Like, those are some of the topics and the things that we talk about.
Thank you so much for sharing your story, Roanna. And thank you all for listening. We know that what happened to her is not a fluke. What's different this time is that Roanna went public with her story. And let's not underestimate how terrifying it is to take on a studio. The impact on her mental health, our mental health, it's been a lot. Yet by standing with her, by uniting and rallying behind her, we have been able to make a significant difference. She is not alone. If you are listening to this podcast and something like this has happened to you, know that you are not alone. This is at the very heart of what we do. We are Women of Color Unite. You will never be alone again. If you or someone you know has been sexually harassed, battered, or assaulted, please reach out for help to the National Sexual Assault Hotline, 1-800-656-4673. 1-800-656-4673. Please speak to someone today.
As a premium subscriber, you get access to our Hot Tea Premium segment, as well as the video version of this podcast. You can find the Spotify subscription link in the show notes. And if you're listening through the Spotify app, be sure to cast your vote on the poll and leave a comment or question in the Q&A. The Women of Color Unite podcast is produced by Nwabata Nnani and edited by Lauren Bonett. The music is by Oh Yeah, featuring Nayuta. Subscribe to the Women of Color Unite podcast to never miss an episode. If you want to submit questions or responses to this episode, either written or a voice note, you can send them to podcast@wokunite.com. Find the show notes and transcripts for this podcast on our website, wokunite.org, where you can also learn more about Women of Color Unite and sign up to become a member for free if you haven't yet, or sign up for our monthly newsletter. Please consider making a tax-deductible donation. Donations are what enable us to create amazing programs like our #StartWith8 career development program. If you're on social media, you can follow the podcast at WOCU Podcast, and you can follow Women of Color Unite at WOCUnite.org. Follow Manon, myself, at Manon de Reeper, and Cheryl at Cheryl_CLBP.
Please stay tuned and join us for the next episode of the Women of Color Unite podcast, because we telling it like it is.
She's bridging the gap and bringing all women together to fight for real inclusion amongst all the diversities. Keep going.